This is News on Parade, Monaco. Her Grace the Princess bestowed the prestigious Medallion d'Or upon famed designer Marcelo in honor of his many accomplishments in the worlds of art and design, including innovations in the worlds of home design, architecture, photography, and of course, fashion. Innovations such as being the first designer to use the vertical line as a slimming effect. In honor of the occasion, Marcelo unveiled the newest version of his greatest creation, the halter top. Ooh la la. Yes, indeed, it was a triumphant day for Marcelo, and by his side as always, Daisy, his great muse, whom Marcelo credits for their great success. Yes, the future looks bright for these two. All is swell and the sky's the limit.
Those were the good days. Things would never be better. Of course, I had money, fame, fortune, and acclaim long before Daisy had arrived. Back then, I was the creative director for all of the fashion houses of the day. And I headed up my own line, which kept me busy with special commissions, freelance work, special favors. I was plenty busy back then. I was the king of the fashion world.
Carl, my assistant, was an apprentice designer, not quite ready or skilled enough to open his own house of fashion. He would contribute some ideas, and I'd let him handle some of the smaller projects. But my word was the last word.
But I must admit, my work had grown stagnant. I'd reached that dangerous point in a career where, no matter what I produced, my peers would call it genius or inspired. And the public would buy everything and clamor for more, even though I knew the work itself was stale and safe.
Even the celebrated Suburban Dream collection was, in my eyes, a safe and boring exercise of going through the motions. It didn't matter if the product was good or bad. I knew that my creative edge was dulled.
I needed a change. I had to leave the old world of fashion and find a new world of inspiration.
I went to California. I went to the sea. And there I saw Daisy, this golden ray of illumination, wearing a dress I had designed when I was just starting out, a playful, hopeful frock that I had long forgotten. She was the embodiment of my long-lost ideals. I knew I had to talk to her, do anything I could to keep her from walking out of my life. Looking back, it was adorable in an embarrassing way. I was tongue-tied and babbling. I offered to buy her a churro. I told her I had designed her dress. Thinking that I was just coming on to her like I'm sure so many others had done, Daisy dared me to prove it. So I told her I could. I bought her a churro and stopped by my design studio to pick up my sketchbook. She had never heard of me, but in a way that made her more endearing. I asked her if I could shoot her. She said, yes, it might be fun. There was nothing spectacular about those quick snapshots, but Daisy had that magical power of sexy innocence. And in one of those photos, those eyes of hers shined like the sky and the sea. Those eyes would change everything. That night, I worked all night and created a dress that the world had never seen. A dress that exuded that sexy innocence that was Daisy. My artistic fires were lit, and once again there was vivid life, not mere lines, appearing on my sketchbook. I called Daisy the next morning and asked if she would model for me. Again, she said, yes, it might be fun.
I had some influence over at Coquette magazine. It was the usual arrangement. I provided exclusive access, special previews, and in exchange, my work often received glowing reviews. I was even granted the privilege of having complete creative control over my photo shoots in the magazine. I shot all the photographs. I chose all the models. I was able to choose an untested, unknown model like Daisy. It was her first photo shoot. And it's a good thing it was her first photo shoot because it started off horribly. The set was delayed by several hours, and if Daisy had been your normal, seasoned model, she would have thrown a tantrum and left. Instead, she just shrugged it off. She grabbed my hand and pulled me away to explore this place she called the mall.
I learned about Daisy's taste fairly quickly. She was a bit more rock and roll bohemian than me, and she didn't mind challenging my more conservative ways. But her tastes and sensibility were genuine, and therefore refreshing. There was no facade around her. Daisy lived honestly, openly, and in the moment. And she enjoyed every moment. And in those moments with her, I found my stoic shell cracking. Her optimism and love of life were intoxicating. It was the little things that made Daisy so adorable. She requested something that no model had ever demanded before on a shoot. Daisy wanted to buy us ice cream, and she wouldn't budge until we had enjoyed our cones. Our set was ready, but again she refused to go. She wanted to go on the Ferris wheel first. I admit these were model demands that I didn't mind conceding to. I was having fun again. I didn't want this day to end. Daisy had a flirtatious nature. It was a transformative experience I hadn't felt in ages.
I know what you're thinking, and I know what my peers thought back then. I wanted her. She wanted riches and fame. And we both consummated our mutual agendas. That wasn't the case. Yes, I was attracted to Daisy, but even then I knew that she was going to play a much more important role than just being another consort of the flesh. She was special. Her innocence, her enthusiasm, her love of life, those things were sacred, and I wasn't about to tarnish them. Daisy was to be chased but never caught. The journey to her and the journey with her. That was the prize.
Originally I had planned a fairly conventional look for the shoot. The usual come-hither look over the shoulder, with eyes gazing into the soul of the camera. Lips slightly open with a whisper of promise, Daisy making the dress look like a second skin. But that wasn't her. We spotted a carousel, and Daisy ran to it before I could say a word. The ride started up, and I knew my best-laid plans would not work with her. I just started shooting. And what we ended up with was unusual. The dress, the first ever halter-top dress, wasn't even featured prominently on the cover. Daisy was clearly the star, and she wasn't even looking at the camera. Somehow, it was the best-selling issue in Coquette magazine history.
Daisy became the new it girl almost overnight. Every woman wanted her look.
From artsy counterculture girls picking up their first fashion magazine, to stylish sorority girls trying to keep up with the new look, they all wanted to be like Daisy. One of my companies became the first to offer home hair color kits. Before you knew it, there were more Daisy blondes than actual blondes.
I benefited from Daisy's rising stardom. Once again, I was fashionable among the fashionable. Business was booming, and the house of Marcelo was growing. More was expected of the brand. We became one of those brands where more than clothes were expected of us. We had to produce that one product that every other designer has ever produced.
He wants it.
She knows it.
can't live without it.
Only she can give it.
He could seize it.
But the thrill comes when she surrenders it.
He'll beg for it.
She can take it back at any time.
What he can't know
Is that she wants to give it.
Consent by Marcelo.
This may surprise you, but I was never a big fan of consent. The smell itself was amazing. It was the combination of vanilla and daisies. But I've always been opposed to fragrances. Growing up, I didn't have a lot of money, and I always thought that perfume and cologne, they were extravagant purchases, giant wastes of money. Really, all you want is your significant other to smell clean and fresh enough to get close to. But I shouldn't complain too much. Consent was the #1 selling fragrance in the world, and when my retirement arrived, Coco's people were nice enough to lease the formula from me. I had a little bit of income, and Consent became the new #5, with some minor alterations. Daisy. Daisy knew exactly how much perfume to wear. Just a little. She too didn't have a lot of money growing up. But she taught me this trick she used to make her perfume last a little bit longer. She would take a few drops of perfume and mix it in with her favorite unscented body lotion. When applied to her body, there'd be a hint of fragrance everywhere.
Yes, those were good times. My creative fires were burning bright, and all of my work had more color and life. Daisy's influence on me was ever present. Where past commissions were works of drudgery and starkness, new works for old clients became trailblazing adventures in patterns and colors.
Celebrities started to ask for my services again. I had designed for celebrities back in the day, but it had been a while. And it felt good to be in demand again.
When Coquette named Shannon Lucio the new It Girl next door, I was honored when she asked me to photograph and style her magazine spread. I had Hollywood's attention again. And when Richie Sambora started wearing my fashions, I had more male celebrity clients than I ever had before. I was incredibly busy, but I had to put them all on the back burner, or hand them off to my assistant Carl, when my mother called. Apparently, I had a distant relative named Lee Marcelo, who was yet another up-and-coming actor. My mother wanted me to help him with his style, give him the look to launch his career. I usually don't work with people I've never heard of before, but my mother asked me to help him, in that motherly way mothers tend to do. So I went to Lee Marcelo's isolated home in the desert, to see if I could help. I didn't see the family resemblance. The first thing I had to do was assess the clothes Lee Marcelo already owned. I needed to get a feel for his personality and personal style, so I asked him to model some outfits for me. I noticed that he owned a lot of sports jerseys. I didn't mind this too much, since I had designed many of them. More disturbing was the high number of funny t-shirts that Lee owned. Disposable, pop culture ephemera that might have been relevant at first, but were now painfully dated. Lee also owned some items that had once been wildly fashionable, but had always been in bad taste. And then there were some truly garish items that had never been fashionable and never would be. Shirts that should be burned if I didn't think they'd hurt the environment. I began to think I had my work cut out for me. But then Lee surprised me with something that was actually simple, timeless, and appropriate. Maybe he wasn't a lost cause after all. Lee further impressed me with his laundry. He washed most of his clothes in a gentle cycle, He hang-dried all of his shirts and the pants that he didn't iron. Washers and dryers can destroy clothes, but most of his clothes, even the ones that were several years old, were still in remarkable condition. The t-shirt thing was still bugging me. I had to ask him about it. There were just too many, and I knew the retail price of most of them. Even the cheap ones. The cost must have added up. Lee explained that he used many of his shirts for filming, and that many of his shirts were giveaway items that he didn't like, but were saved and used for activities like gardening or housework. But he did admit that many were just impulse buys that he should have ignored. But I still needed to find out why he owned so many sports jerseys. Having designed most of them, I knew the retail prices on them were especially high. Lee gave some vague reasons that I couldn't quite follow, but I was impressed by how he acquired these premium items. He only bought them when they were out of season or a past season's design. It's remarkable the discounts you can receive by purchasing perfectly good clothes that are supposedly out of fashion. It's a good practice no matter what kind of clothing items you want to purchase. Smart purchasing aside, it still seemed like Lee owned too many clothes. And he conceded that I might have been right about that. But then he started speaking about his job as an actor. He talked of having all sorts of outfits for the wide variety of roles he auditioned for. Lee needed a wide variety of clothes at the ready. In a way, it made a lot of sense for his situation. Daisy also had more clothes than she knew what to do with. Like Lee, she had many situational outfits that she needed at the ready. My sessions with Lee Marcelo and my time spent with Daisy lingered with me. Lee was an extra turned up-and-coming actor. He wasn't pulling in a leading man's salary, but he still needed a versatile wardrobe. He went to auditions for various roles, and needed to have various looks to fit those roles. Daisy was an overnight fashion sensation. She had reached that status of being given clothes. But if she were still in her old job as a catering server, she wouldn't be able to afford the wardrobe she had now. Daisy would be struggling to put together a flexible wardrobe that all women need. An idea began brewing in my head. A versatile, flexible wardrobe. And I wanted it to be affordable for everyone. Soon after, Daisy and I were shooting another commercial for Consent. We were between scenes, fooling around and trying on each other's famous sunglasses. It was a beautiful day, and it felt like the right moment to unveil the new design ethos I was ready to adopt. It would be daring and run counter to what most of the fashion industry had become, and therefore, it was very risky. But Daisy was as supportive as always. She said I should go for it, because it might be fun.
The fashion world had created this outrageous system. Every season, new lines were presented with outlandish runway designs that no one would ever wear. After the hype and the dog and pony show were over, ready-to-wear versions of the runway designs would be released for mass consumption, and granted, the system worked. But it just seemed so extravagant, excessive, and completely out of touch. I was going to change that. I was no longer going to design for my peers or the press. I was going to design for everyday men and women. A few basic, classic outfits that would cover every role a person has to play. The world would soon know all about it. The look, the line, the philosophy. It would be called Dress Like an Actor.